So how many times is that then? How many times over are you Grandpa Joe?
I'm a grandpa twice now.
Oh, look at that.
But I'm still, I have to say, at this point, I am still only 57 years old. So I'm still a youngster.
57 though.
I don't want people thinking that I'm an ancient old fart.
57 is still quite a lot though, to be fair.
No, it's not. 57 is extremely young, and when you get there, you'll understand what I mean.
It is definitely lots, because that's another 19 years of fully being alive, and I think of the last 19 years, and they took a long time to go past.
But 57 is kid stuff nowadays. 60 is the new 40, you know.
Well, it depends how healthy a lifestyle you're living, Joe. I'd imagine, obviously,
my lifestyle is deeply healthy, apart from occasional traveling around the world and occasional drinking alcohol. But beyond that, I'm fine.
So the worst thing, because I've led the nomadic lifestyle also, is hotel food. And then you go, it's very tempting just to go, give me all the delicious food from your menu each and every day. And those things are not designed for health. They are designed for taste and satisfaction, aren't they?
No, I disagree with that. It's just lack of vegetables.
Oh, that might be it. Yeah. If Mrs. Spanners isn't around, I don't eat vegetables.
One should eat vegetables if one can, but if one goes to Germany, for example, that is an impossibility because no German ever eats a vegetable in their life.
How good! We've already alienated an entire nation. We've not even started.
Are we online yet?
Yeah, we're online. This isn't going out on the podcast, but there's still people listening.
They are then.
Who are like?
It's not my fault they're listening, is it?
To be fair, Germans.
How many Germans are there out there? Come on.
We've got a German panelist. He's sort of Nick is German.
But, is he listening?
He's always listening. Yeah. Well, as a general rule of thumb, Joe, shall we say that it's still offensive even if there's no one from that nation listening? I mean that is.
Why is it offensive? It's a reflection on the reality of Germanian life. They don't eat vegetables.
So, guys, apologies for Joe's screen. Again, we tried to fix the video resolution. There's not Vaseline smeared on it. We're going to get an HD camera installed. He's tried cleaning it. He's out in the countryside. He's out in the sticks. Just use your imagination to render a perfect, vision of what you think Joe should be. In fact, shall I just get a picture of you from the internet and just
No, what you can do is, if you want a perfect image of what I should be, I should show you the perfect image of what my life is like. So here we are. You see? Can you see? Actually, this is going to work.
Yeah.
Is it?
So it's on your phone on a really blurry webcam. I can see some trees, Joe. Your web awareness.
How about that?
Yeah, it's still pretty bad. Like you are.
No, it's lousy. You're quite right, lousy. Yeah.
I mean, you're a great journalist, Joe. You're a great journalist. As a YouTuber,
I'm a lousy photographer.
As a YouTuber in general, I'm not rating you, not right now. But let's divert to your area of expertise. Let's say hello to the chat room first of all. Bradley Philpott's in there, racy driver man. Charles Ford, my new iRacing nemesis. You made me stay up.
I invented iRacing. Did you know that?
You invented iRacing.
I did.
You're not going to...
I can prove it.
Oh, my God. All right, cool. Yeah, iRacing will come up later, actually. There's a listener question. Joe...
there is a man called Dave Kammer who invented iRacing, who was entirely inspired. There's a video about him on the internet. I can give you a www thing where he talks about, if it hadn't been for reading a book that I wrote in 1988... I think it was, he would never have done it.
That's nearly the same as inventing it, isn't it, Joe?
Well, it's not nearly the same, but it's inspiring the invention thereof.
Who's that big fella in Flash Gordon? Like, who always makes up stories? You're not going to go, what's his name?
I'm not making up stories. It's real.
It doesn't sound.
Go to. Hang on a minute. I'm gonna blank you out now and go and find it because it's on. If you go to flatoutpublishing.com. Which is my website when it works. Which it does occasionally.
Are you talking about sim racing and not iRacing specifically?
I'm talking about... Hang on a minute.
Right, somebody tell me who I'm thinking about. The guy that was in Flash Gordon. That guy. Come on. Who is it?
I don't know who it is.
Big fella. Come on.
Anyway, go to flatoutpublishing.com and there is a story. Dave Kammer talks Grand Prix legends and iRacing, and here's the man who invented them. And if you watch that video there, you will find that he was inspired to start it all because he read a book called the Grand Prix, the World Atlas of Motor Racing. And oddly enough, I wrote that, and I had no idea.
Brian Blessed! That's it. That's who you're being right now. You're being Brian Blessed. Did I ever tell you about the time I invented sim racing?
Go to flatoutpublishing.com and you'll find the whole story. In fact, this winter I had direct communication with Dave Kammer of iRacing. And he said, once again, without your inspiration, it wouldn't have happened. So there you go.
Oh, well, I hope you won't mind retelling that story once we come onto the live stream.
You can tell that story. I'm as amazed as you are, but it's actually the truth. He was inspired by reading this book, which many people were, apparently. I didn't know about this until recently.
And that's when I invented childbirth, of course, and that was in 1472. That's before the years were numbered. Of course, I numbered them very well. Is that what we're getting at, Joe? Is that the territory we're in now? I don't believe a word of this.
Well, while you're there piddling about, go to flatoutpublishing.com and listen to the video, and then you'll know what I'm talking about.
Joe Saward's alive! What is a Joe Saward? We're doing lines from Flash Gordon now, but adapted for you. Somebody buy Joe a webcam made in the last 15 years. Yeah, we're working on it. It's a work in progress. But look, listen to everyone gather round the blurry YouTube tree and listen to Uncle Joe. I'm going to mute Uncle Joe right now so he can't interfere with my intro. We know that's an ongoing issue, and I've cottoned on that I can just mute it now. Here we go. You are listening to Inside F1 with Joe Saward on Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Inside F1 with Joe Saward. I'm Spanners, the host and producer of Missed Apex Podcast. We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I'm joined by F1 media legend and inventor of sim racing, Joe Saward. How's it going, Joe?
I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for that very kind introduction.
We'll find out later the full story of how you basically invented all of esports, because we knew you were coming round, but I didn't realise quite why. It's a good story coming up later. A good winter, though, Joe. All rested up. You were peacefully holed up in a cave with a glass of red wine all winter long.
Not quite, but it's a nice concept to think of, yes. I've been busy digging gardens and having grandchildren and all this sort of lark, you know, as one does. Oh. And I've been writing every day. I haven't, if you noticed on the blog, you'll see that I'm now at fascinating Formula One fact number 80-something. So every single day since I got home, I've been writing, much to the annoyance of my wife, I have to say.
So you haven't been fully rested?
I'm quite rested, but I could certainly use another month at least, and I've got slightly less than that. But such is life, you know. We do what we do. So, you know, I think probably if somebody said you've got 3 months off, another 3 months off, I'd probably say that's fine. I can handle that. I do know a number of Formula One people who have said to me that I could use another, they could use another month off at least. But, you know, there are some of the more sort of lunatic fringe who just want to get back racing again all the time. They'd race on December the 1st if they could. Sorry, December the 31st.
Oh, well, I suppose for you, even though F1's kind of shutting down, there's a sense of freedom because you haven't got the constant drumbeat of races and news, so you can settle down and, you know, write another edition of your bathroom book, Fascinating Facts.
Well, yeah, if you look at what's happened in the winter, seriously, what real news stories. Every day people are churning out stories, almost all of which, to be fair, is garbage. But they are feeding a market that they think is there. My view is that unless there's anything really super dramatic, and I think I've written 2 news stories over the winter that had real sort of, importance. Otherwise, I've just been doing my fascinating facts, and people have been coming to read them. If they like to discover more about the sport, fair enough. But I'm not chasing around after every Ricardo says I'm going to love Hulkenberg, and Hulkenberg says I'm going to hate Ricardo stories. I don't care. It's not real stuff, is it?
What kind of outlet would hang around all winter long churning out content just to try and pick up extra listeners? I mean readers.
Everybody would do that, but that's not my way. I'm much happier doing what I do. So,
and I'm not going to waste my.
Yeah. I'm not going to waste my energy on writing crap stories that everyone else has written in a crap way anyway.
Joe, if I was to put you on the spot and say you've spent all winter churning out these fascinating facts, and I don't mean churning in a disrespectful way.
Churning is a very, very sound description of what I've been doing, yeah.
If I was to ask if you would be kind enough to regale our Missed Apex audience with one such fascinating fact, and I'm putting you on the spot, would you be willing to share one?
Well, all you have to do is go to Joe Blogs F1 and read 82 of them. It's not that hard.
Why don't you do it like a tease here, and then people go, "Oh, that's such a good fact. I want to find the other 81 more."
There are 81 of them. I can't remember all of them. It's. I mean, they're very, very wild and varied. There was one 2 days ago about the Roman Empire.
Oh, I'm fully all about the Romans. Tell me the Roman Empire F1 story. Chariot racing.
Chariot racing, the point I was trying to make is that the most successful sportsman in the history of the world, financially speaking, was a chariot racer who earned some ludicrous amount of money in his career, which makes the earnings of Lewis Hamilton look like small change.
There was quite a lot of death involved, though, Joe.
There was a lot of death involved, but this guy did an entire career, and I think he earned billions of in terms of
Roman bucks.
Well, no, in terms of if you apparently you can work out the value of money, and it has been worked out. And this man earned something like 15 billion in his career. So all these sportsmen of today think they're jolly wealthy and all the rest of it, but they knew nothing, because this bloke, he was the bee's knees, and even parts of the dog one can't talk about on podcasts.
So in chariot racing, that's basically early ovals, isn't it? And it was all about the crashes.
No, it was more than that, because not only was it all about the crashes, but it was also, it became political. There was an entire uprising based on, they tried to overthrow the empire or the emperor based on the different teams involved. They had street fights, they had battles. I mean, we're talking about proper, serious hooliganism. Before motorsport was invented, but it was motorsport. It only just had, the difference was it had 4 horsepower.
4 horsepower. I like that. So are you advocating then a return to just full-on violence in the grandstands, Mercedes fans versus Ferrari fans? I'm up for it. Let's go. Let's do it.
Well, I suppose. No, I'm not really advocating that. But then again, I'm not sure there are enough fans from anybody really going to the grandstands these days, Well,
so. What about an out-and-out war between people who think the new Ferrari is red and then people who correctly think it is orange? How about that? I'd be up for that war.
Orange.
It is orange, isn't it? Have you not seen it?
Have you thought of going to see an optician?
You're on Team Red.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I look at it and I see red. No, I don't mean that in the sense that I see red. Wow. I just see red.
Well, I do apologise.
I don't see a very nice red. I thought the old red was much nicer.
Wow.
When I look at McLaren, I don't see papaya. I see orange. But then again, colours are a weird thing because people see colours in different ways.
Well, I mean, it doesn't bode well for the rest of the show, because if you can be that wrong about the colour of the Ferrari car, I mean, can we really trust any of your opinions?
Well, I haven't seen it live yet. I shall do that tomorrow.
So you are going to Barcelona. You are testing. You love testing. You love absorbing the atmosphere.
No,
you think it's brilliant.
I don't love testing. I've been testing no time since 1990, but I am going to Barcelona tomorrow
for the testing because you love it.
No.
Oh.
It's for something else. It is for a working group. Ooh. Actually, it's for a yes, it's for a working group. It's for the promotional working group of Formula One. And I'm going there to explain to them that they need to be nicer to journalists.
Really?
Yeah, no, because I mean, look, we had a Mercedes launch which had no access to anybody. We had a McLaren launch where they gave it to the fans first. And we went through last year with Ferrari not allowing a single person to talk to the media. So there's something clearly wrong. And I'm a member of the FIA media working group. And we had a meeting the other day and we decided that we needed to talk to the teams about where things were going. And so I'm going to see them tomorrow and just say, look, chaps, we've got a few problems. And it's a serious thing. Because otherwise the written press, and the written press is not just newspaper articles, it's internet as well. It's going to die out and there will be no specialists left. You'll only get what Sky News gives you or what the big organizations, and who knows who they've done deals with. You know, you have to have some independent voices left.
Wait a minute. What, you're saying there's some underhand deal where Toto Wolff says, listen, Sky, you must be very kind about our team orders. Otherwise, we will stop access. You think that's the kind of thing that might happen? That specific example?
No, I don't think that specific example is correct because Toto Wolff is one of the more intelligent team principals, despite his best efforts not to appear intelligent. He's very smart. Some of the others are not that smart, sadly, as was proved last year at Ferrari. They made a complete pig's ear of the whole thing, and that wasn't the fault of Arriva Bene either. That was the fault of Mr. Marchione, who just decreed that no one would talk to the press. And everyone was so frightened of him they didn't, and that was a complete disaster because what Ferrari did was alienated everybody, including the TVs. It was really unsmart. And they have to relearn how to do things. And the thing is, the press are not stupid. I mean, people think we're stupid, but we're not stupid. And we just want to be treated fairly. We don't want the glib rubbish. We don't want lightweight stuff that people who aren't here in the races are happy to settle for. We want to have good information, good access, and we want to give good stories because that's what we do.
So you're not a one-man band. You've got a team, but
there's a whole bunch of people who think in the same way that I do. In a lot of respects, we're all one-man bands because we are producing our own different things. But the fact is that what we want to do is to give the best. We're in it to give the best possible reportage to fans, and we've been doing that for years. It's not just about the money. There's no money in it. It's a lousy job if you want to make money. People who write about the aerodynamics of Formula One cars, and you might like to listen to this because all technical analysis that is done on Formula One is largely bullshit. Because if the people, I'm sorry, beep.
11:21, add yet another beep. Welcome back to Inside F1, Spanners. Go on, go. Technical analysis. By the way,
technical analysis is the aerodynamics are so complicated that anybody who pretends they understand them should be employed by the team because you get paid a whole load more money for understanding how the aero works. If you're a journalist, aero is just impossible to understand. It's so clever, it's so advanced, and vortexes are doing all kinds of weird stuff that we can't understand for 1 minute. So pretending we know how to do it is just silly.
I quite agree with you, Joe. Thanks for that insight. Guys, be sure to tune into Missed Apex Tech Time with F1 tech journalist Matthew Summerfield on Sunday here on the live stream.
Does he talk about vortices?
All the time. Oh no, the vortices is running down the flange. That's exactly how he sounds. Yeah, but
and does he work in a wind tunnel?
No, and I will defend Summers in that I don't think he ever says, oh, that little flappy bit means that they're going to get more downforce in this kind of corner. I think he generally likes to talk about the philosophy of the way things are going. I think he's a fan of the tech rather than pretending to be a proper analyst of the tech, if that makes sense.
I don't think we're capable, and I don't mean this just my point of view. I think any journalist who claims that they understand the technology of modern aerodynamics in Formula One is just not They don't. Nobody understands it. Even the aerodynamicists don't get it. It's so complicated.
That in itself is a problem, though, for a
It
spectator
is.
sport.
I'm not saying that's not a problem. I'm saying that, let's not dress up things and pretend to be what we're not. Because if we understood it, we would be employed by the team. Seriously, it's so advanced.
So back to your meeting, Joe.
Yes.
The chat room, which you can join, listener, by going to Missed Apex Podcast on YouTube, and you can get a little notification there when we go live. You'll get a little buzz on your phone, and you can come and watch us. You can watch me here in my HD and Joe in his 1x3 res webcam that he's got going on there. And you can come and play in the chat room. And Stuart Neal has said there, Spanners, this is your chance to have podcasters represented. Joe, when you go in that meeting, are you going to fight for more shed-based podcasters to be represented and have access in F1?
Well, how can a shed-based podcast have access in F1? I've been fighting for a very long time to get some video content allowed for journalists in the paddock, and we're winning. This season, we are going to have written journalists in the paddock are going to have the ability to use a certain amount of video per weekend. It's not going to be a lot, and it's not going to be interview with drivers, but it will be something. And that is a big step forward because the world is going towards video. We all understand that. We all understand that, everybody who can be in the paddock wants to show everybody else that they are in the paddock, because that's one thing that all the pretend coverage that we have in Formula One. I'm not knocking.
I feel attacked.
No, you shouldn't feel attacked because you're at least doing it properly and you're trying very hard. And
thanks, Joe.
But it's true. What I really don't like is people who pretend they're not there. Sorry, who pretend they are there when they're not. And there's a lot of people who do that. And so having that little bit of video from the paddock every weekend will be very useful. We won't be allowed to do interviews with drivers, but we will be allowed to interview each other, if you like, or we will be able to show ourselves in the paddock. But when the cars are running, we can't show you car shots, but we will have something. They're giving us something, which is a start. Obviously, there was a huge amount of resistance to that from TV companies who said, well, why should written journalists have that? Our view is, well, why should TV companies have the press conferences? They're designed for us, not for them. But Sky has completely taken the FIA press conference and has destroyed it, basically, because they go and listen to everybody else's questions, and they broadcast it, and everything that is said in the press conference is no longer ours. So as a result of that, all you get is people profiling and asking questions if they want to be on TV, but real questions are not asked.
So that German guy, is he German? The one who asks the extraordinarily long questions? Is he doing that as a bet?
Well, there's a number of people who do that, but there is one who I believe might be known as a South African.
Right. Sorry.
Who does that a lot, and that may be profiling. I'm not entirely sure I understand what he does, but there you are. He makes himself happy doing it. The answers get given to everybody. And therefore, what's the point in doing it? There is no logical approach. There is an Italian who always asks 3 questions in every question, who's quite funny. But otherwise, it's really not worth doing because everything you said is instantly out there in the world.
Yeah, you don't have any advantage over anyone else. Do you ever bother asking
that's also true. That's also true. Some of the teams are now recording what the drivers say to the press, and they're instantly publishing it. So they're basically completely undermining everything that we do, and that's why there needs to be some conversation with the teams and saying, look, come on, chaps, you've got to give us something. Otherwise, why are we traveling around the world at vast expense? Mm-hmm. There's no logic, and this is what's happening. Gradually, the press corps is dying. And is that a good thing? People say, well, don't be so old-fashioned. You're a silly old fart. Why does anyone have to ever talk to anybody? Sorry, a silly old bleep.
Oh, you're reading the chat room, are you, Joe? Are you?
No, I'm not reading the chat room, but I know what people say. But what people don't understand is that if you don't have people who are there asking the proper questions, you'll never get any proper answers. And so they think, oh, the teams will tell us what we want and F1 will tell us what we want. They won't. They'll tell us what they want to tell you. And if you accept that as being proper news, you're not very clever. So, what you want is journalists asking hard questions that they have to answer. And if you don't have that, it's just the whole thing is what the Germans would call ersatz, which is fake.
I'm just going to, with your track record, I'm just going to assume that is a German swear word. I'm just going to beep it anyway, just for safety.
Ersatz means fake.
I don't trust you. I'm sorry.
During the Second World War, they used to serve ersatz coffee.
Really?
Which was basically acorns. And they basically would make coffee out of acorns, give it to everybody, and everyone would go, that's ersatz cafe. Okay, so that's all. It's a perfectly acceptable word. But the point is, if you want proper journalism from Formula One, you have to allow proper journalists to do the job, because TV companies and internet journalists from afar can't do it. As much as they think they can, and as much as what they can do maybe can replace what proper journalists do, ultimately you'll get a far worse service. You won't get to know more about Formula One. You'll just get what they want you to know.
Breaking news, Joe Saward, member of F1 Press Corps, likes F1 Press Corps. But what are you going to do?
No, I'm trying to save the F1 Press Corps because there won't be one. That's the point I'm making. There will not be a press corps in F1 before too long if they go on cutting back.
I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this. The passion of an artisan tradesman, Joe. So you're not just here for an insight into F1 news itself, which we definitely will get to, but I do enjoy getting this insight into the kind of the day-to-day of what it's like trying to report on F1. And if you remember back to kind of the dark days of my childhood, you just got what you were given. And I don't think many people would argue that it's worse now that you can get a variety of opinions.
It's far worse now. It's far worse now.
You think it's...
When you say you get what you were given, that was depending on what you're reading. If you were... In the old days, one had access to drivers. One could talk to drivers. And they would tell you what they really thought. If it wasn't always on the record, it wasn't always for quoting, but they'd say, this car's rubbish, and things like that. That you just won't get anybody saying nowadays because you can't get to them. And so teams are basically, the PR departments are rather, how shall we say, they tend to dictate things. And it's not their job to dictate things. It's their job to try to make their team look good. And the fact is that what fans want, and I'm not dictating what fans want, I'm just telling you based on my experience, what fans want is to know what people are like. People like people. They don't want to know what some PR man tells you.
We want heroes.
Exactly. So a PR man says this person's a hero. Does that make them a hero? No, it makes them a PR man who says they're a hero. It's not the same. Let the people talk for themselves.
Bit of talking of the people talking for themselves. Bit of an argument going on in the chat room here. Spanner's not knowing that ersatz is a real word is dating himself, says Mark Malloy. Someone else is suggesting that I need to get on myself a thesaurus for not knowing it. But then we have a bit of controversy because Bruce Wayne says ersatz does not mean fake. Fälschung means fake.
Okay, so what does ersatz mean?
I don't know, Joe. I'm the idiot.
No, well, ask
I need
your man Bruce or whatever his name is if he's so smart. Ask him what ersatz means.
I'm a bit curious about this video stuff that you say you're getting, Joe, because I am fascinated with your model of F1 reporting. So the way I've known you as a reporter has been through your blog. And but your blog is probably more of a portal to Joe, a way to access Joe. The reason you go to the Grand Prix is to sell and report on your GP Plus magazine, which is an online...
No, that's not.
Oh.
The reason I go to Grand Prix is because it's the only way you can do the job properly. And the reason I go to Grand Prix is that because, one, I'm there. People know I'm there. I've always been there. And I have access to people that you can't get access to. I can walk in and have conversations with people you can't have access to because I've been around a long time. That's what it's all about. And if I don't do that, I'll be quite, I'll save myself 40 grand a year if I don't go to all the races. But I won't be a true voice of Formula One anymore because I won't have access to those people. I might be able to ring them up. Occasionally I'll get through when they're not busy. But the fact is that when you're there and in the paddock, you are a credible figure, and they recognize the effort that is being made to report on the sport, and they respond to that. They don't necessarily respond to it enough, but we're all based on our numbers. At the end of the day, the trouble is they don't always get the numbers right. Everyone thinks that Sky TV is, whoops, pardon, I dropped my pencil. They're not allowed to do that, am I?
Everyone heard Joe. Didn't need to explain. It was very loud.
You see, everyone thinks that Sky News is the biggest and most important thing in the world, whatever it's called. It's not, because they have a very limited number of people who are actually watching them. Their access for the number of people they have is very small. You compare that to the Hindustan Times, that has far more viewers, readers, whatever, people who use the media available, far more than Sky does. But does the Hindustan Times get access? No, because people haven't figured that out. The Sun is more powerful than Sky by a long way. Now, okay, they're owned by the same people, maybe, whatever. But the fact is that there are newspapers in this world and there are outlets on the internet that are far more powerful than these TV companies who are getting access they don't deserve to have because they charge such huge amounts of money, they have very small viewers. And Channel 4 is actually, I would say, probably more important than Sky in that respect because their viewership numbers are huge in comparison.
Well,
Whereas actually, when all is said and done, China television is far more important than all of them.
Yes.
If you're talking just numbers.
So.
Well, you asked the question.
No, I did. Perhaps I'm not smart enough. And also, I was getting distracted with the ongoing German language discussion in the live chat room. And I did let that distract me, so I do apologise. The interest in that has faded from this side of the webcam. But suffice to say that let's just assume you're right, and I beeped it anyway, so it doesn't matter. I am interested to know what you're going to do with that video, because I would say the nearest thing you have to a video outlet would be this channel here. But we can talk about that offline, Joe. Remember us. Think about us, Joe.
Well, the thing about it is that there's lots of different ways you can use your 5 minutes of video if that's what it is for a whole weekend. And 5 minutes is worth something. But how you use it, the technology involved, is not necessarily important. The fact is that we have it, and that's really key, because without it, with the world is gradually moving towards video. If you look at any kind of news outlet, everything is now video. The written word is, people can't cope with more than 200 words because they run out of energy, poor dears. They need more sugar. And to get to 350 words, they need a Cornish pasty, whatever. It's actually incredibly sad, which is in a way why some of the problems we have around the world are coming along, because people don't read enough anymore. People vote on things they have no idea what they're voting on. Let's not get into too much detail here.
Well, we can't, Joe, because I don't have an opinion on those kind of politics one way or the other.
Did I say I have an opinion on the politics? I have an opinion on the fact that people are voting when they have not the faintest idea what they're voting on.
Yeah, but I follow you on Twitter as well, Joe. So
well, that's as maybe, but there's also, it's not just a European example. There are American examples as well. There are decisions being made by voters that are insane because they don't understand history. They don't understand what they're doing. And, I actually think that that education should be included in the ability to vote. But that's another story.
Find people on both sides, Joe. Find people on both sides. Let's talk a little bit of F1 news, because as you say, you have your eyes and ears on the ground. And I refuse to believe for a second that in the Joe Saward, south of France, countryside bat cave or Joe Cave, you have not had your ear to the ground and your finger on the pulse of F1. Now, me and the lads, Kyle Power, the edgy Kyle Power, and Chris Stevens were chatting yesterday, and I think where we kind of got lost is the new players in funding this year in Formula One. So from the business side of Formula One, there's at least 4 teams that are seeing huge changes in the way they're funded. And as we know, money talks. Money means you can explore lots of different avenues, failed ones, go down dead ends, and still come out with something good. So we've got Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo, and I can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, and the Stroll billions coming in as well, which are just fascinating changes in dynamic of those teams, and people just don't understand what that means in real terms. So if you don't mind, Joe, I'm going to sort of tap your brain about some of those.
Well, I think it's fair to say we all know that Alfa Romeo is a car company. They sell cars. They have some money. They're part of the Fiat Chrysler Group, which incidentally, you may read in some less well-informed websites that they're part of the same group as Ferrari. They're not. They're separate. And what doesn't make a lot of sense to me in that respect is that Alfa Romeo is going to be, when you see them listed on the TV screens, it should, I don't know if it will, but it should say Alfa Romeo Ferrari, which makes no sense at all. It's a bit like Aston Martin Honda, which doesn't make any sense to me either. But, Alfa Romeo wants to be seen as being a sexy sporting brand. And so running Ferrari engines is not the way to do it. I guess it's the only choice they have up until 2021, when they can change things, and then we'll have Alfa Romeo, and then they can do the job properly. And in the meantime, I think it's a stopgap arrangement, which is fine, but it just won't be as good as it should be if they had their own engines. Second one, Stroll. Racing Point. They have a gambling company behind them. Good for them. Gambling, there's a lot of money in gambling. And if they are happy to take that on and play the game, good for them. We'll see. I don't think there's any money worries in that respect, because those people really do have money. Everyone likes to gamble.
When you say those people, are you talking about
Sport Pesa?
Sport, right. So this isn't just Lawrence Stroll pouring personal billions in. No.
It's a very big African. It's actually an African company based in Kenya, and it's there's a lot of gambling in Africa, and there's a lot of money, and they want to tell the world that Sport Pesa is a company that does a lot of gambling online. So it makes sense. There are a couple of deals that don't necessarily make sense. If you go on to Haas, we have this energy drink called Rich. I've yet to find anybody who's ever found a can of Rich energy drink. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have money.
Yeah.
What it means is that it's a gamble, it's a bet. And they've got a good deal to get the whole of the car. And I guess that they're probably supported by investors. And the guy in charge with the rather strange beard has said several times that he has billionaire investors behind him. Well, good for him. There are some tax advantages in investing rather than giving your money to the government. They're not huge, I have to say. They're not massively big amounts of money you can save in tax, but that kind of makes sense. You make a bet on a company that hasn't really started yet. The only thing is that from a business point of view, I don't really understand the idea of promoting a brand that doesn't have production and doesn't have distribution. But I'm not a good businessman, so maybe they're smarter than me. And if they're billionaires, they probably are smarter than me, or luckier anyway. So that one is interesting. The Haas team absolutely insists that they've got bank guarantees, which means that if the company doesn't pay, the bank will. And that's what a bank guarantee actually means. So the banks, obviously, and banks, as we know, are mean, nasty people. So if they believe the people enough, the money will come up. So I think Haas is, we'll see what happens. But when I start to see Rich appearing in supermarkets, then I'll say, okay, now it makes sense.
You can get it on Amazon. You can order it. I know some people have gone out of their way to order some.
And has
Amazon.
It arrived?
Yeah.
They've drunk it?
My colleague was parading his cans of Rich Energy around the floor plate, and the consensus is it tastes exactly like Red Bull and Monster. It's almost like if you want to invest in something and have your name on a tangible product when really you're just a money and a business guy, stick it on the side of a sugary drink, and that's you given a business identity. That's kind of how it feels like.
Up to a point, but there is also, when people look at Red Bull and Monster and these kind of companies, rich people go, holy camoly, there's a lot of money to be made there if you get your branding right. Now, I don't know if Rich Energy is the right branding or being in Formula One is the right thing to do, but I can see what they're trying to do. If you've got money to burn some and try to make a load more.
How much did they pay Lotus for their colour scheme and the livery idea?
Well, they wouldn't have paid Lotus anything because Lotus doesn't own the colour scheme or the livery idea.
Spiritually, it does, Joe.
No, it doesn't. It's business. This is a business world. It's black and it's gold and nobody owns it. And I mean, if you look at the car, it's pretty hard to see Rich anyway. So it's kind of wacky. Anyway, whatever. Gene Haas is no idiot. And he's sufficiently convinced that there's money there to do a deal. I think that they got a cheap deal because Rich Energy was talking to Williams. And Haas came in and made a better offer, I think, when all is said and done.
That's like some proper needle there then, isn't it?
Yes, I think there is a certain amount of proper needle. As to Rocket, the Williams sponsor.
Careful, Joe. Careful, Joe.
I know Jonathan Kendrick, the man behind it.
Okay.
And I've known him since 1984. I mean, I haven't known him since then. I first met him in 84. He disappeared soon after that. And to be honest, I didn't miss him a lot. There's a few people in Formula 3 at that time who weren't particularly happy with the way he did business. He ran the Yokohama tire franchise. If you ask Eddie Jordan, some of the words might be printable. If you ask Gary Anderson, some of the words might not be printable, but he had a reputation of being a fairly ruthless businessman who was around racing for a very short time, went off and apparently made loads of money in the Eastern Bloc. But what he's done is fair enough. He's you know what Rocket means?
I do not.
Well, ROK is a large group of brands which seems to have businesses in about 20, 25 different things, a bit virgin-y, if you like, or virginal, I suppose would be the right expression. And it means Return of Kendrick, ROK. So basically, Kendrick is coming back. Now, where's the money come from? They have the backing of a very, very wealthy man called Paul DeJoria, who is an investor from America, who made lots of money in Patron tequila and things like that. And, if he's convinced that Kendrick is the right man to go with, well, good for him. So we'll see. Maybe Kendrick is not the sharp businessman that he was in the old days. He must be quite old now, to be quite honest, because he was certainly older than me, and I was quite young at the time. So he's got to be in his mid-60s, I would say, probably even late 60s by now.
Yeah, because you are already yourself many years old, Joe.
No, I'm not. I'm still very young, actually.
No, I would say
for
several.
A grandfather, I'm remarkably young. I've got several years to go before I get to 60. So.
Well, several is generous. I would say a few. That is a few, isn't it?
Well, what's the difference between several and a few?
Few is less, I would say, Joe. So you've given us a great insight into some of the backers. And honestly, this is the kind of stuff that there's a lot of misinformation about. And unless you're someone who's going to trawl around on Reddit and decide what's true and not true, it's useful to have it from someone like you. So,
well, there's also a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of people who don't know anything about these people. I mean, admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about some of them, but you can do a certain amount of research into them. And you can see that, you can find out with experience more than anything else, because you got to remember in Formula One, we've seen all kinds of flash Harrys, if you like. I don't know if that's an expression you will.
I'm sure back in the 20s, Joe, that was all the rage.
It's a cultural reference to things back in the old days before you were born.
Yeah, us millennials.
A flash Harry was a bit of a wide boy. And we've seen endless numbers of these people in Formula One. So, it generally indicates a team that is desperate for money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very worried. I have to say, I'm very worried about the state of Williams, given not just the sponsorship deal, but the fact that they're not going to be out in time for the first test. I mean, I doubt we'll see if they get a car running at all this week, but I doubt it. But they're already on the back foot.
Well, that is a question that we had from our Twitter people. And thank you very much to the people who got in touch when I tweeted from @SpannersReady and from @MissedApexF1. Joe Saward is just Joe Saward on Twitter. There is only one. There was a lot of questions about Williams. So Papa Bird said, why does Joe think Williams are 2 days behind every other team? Our Noodle says, does Joe think Williams are only 2 days behind other teams? And you just alluded to perhaps it's
they're at least a week. They're at least a week behind everybody. But the fact is that if you miss, you have 8 days of testing before the season begins. If you miss 4 of them, you've lost half your ability to react. Then if you have an organization that is not as well funded as others, your speed of reaction is less. So inevitably, unless they produce an utterly brilliant car, which is suddenly going to be at the front and then will fall backwards, a la Brawn, if you like, they're already going to be at the back, aren't they?
Yeah, it's not good.
You shouldn't be with a Mercedes engine.
Have you?
And the damage that can
sorry,
do.
Joe.
Not just for yeah, go on.
No, sorry, Joe. Have you any insight into why? Because we were just wildly speculating yesterday. We've seen stuff on Reddit that it's about parts not being developed on time, but it's not like they didn't know this date was coming for a long time. And if they're not ready for the first week of testing, and something comes out for the second week of testing, it's not going to be a case of, well, they're just going to start from day one. The likelihood is that it's going to be even behind where they would have wanted to have been on day one, just to make sure they get out in week 2. The whole thing is heartbreaking for well-wishers of Williams.
Absolutely. The truth of the matter is, whether you like it or not, is that 9 teams have managed to do it and 1 team hasn't. And what that tells you is that one team is either not competent to produce everything in the time available and get the correct timelines, or it hasn't got enough money to do the thing in time. I don't know the answer to that, but you can't have ambitious timelines if you haven't got the money to back it up. You've got to be able to deliver, and they haven't. But they haven't delivered for a number of years now. We're talking, we're looking into a serious disaster that is heading. I fear that it's, how can you be doing this with a Mercedes engine? That's the key point. And what happens when Mercedes finally say, well, why on earth are we associating ourselves with these people? It has to come.
But not actually getting to testing, which is a date that hasn't moved. It hasn't jumped and surprised them. That smacks of a project management error. That smacks of general engineering logistics going wrong. And more, the drumbeat from fans and on forums is talking about Claire Williams. And a lot of the anger and the disappointment is being focused on Claire Williams at the moment. Is it unavoidable when an organisation is failing year on year on year? You look right at the top and there's nowhere past Claire to look. And she's getting the brunt of the blame.
I mean, there are places to look. But the fact is that if you're the boss and your technical staff screw up, the boss has to bite the bullet and say, you're fired, in the finest traditions of Donald Trump. You're fired, But the fact is that if you're letting people get away with things, or you don't know enough to stop it happening, I don't know why, the whys and the wherefores. I'm sure Claire is very passionate about it, because she is, but that doesn't mean she knows how to do it. But at the end of the day, Paddy Lowe is the chief technical officer. He has to take, if there's a bullet coming this year, it's his bullet. They've already fired the chief designer and the chief aero last year. They've replaced them with new people. If they can't do it, then next one has to be the chief technical officer. It's his responsibility to get things delivered on time. If he hasn't done it, sorry. Now, if they don't then do that, if they say we'll give him another chance, then that becomes the fault of the super management, because ultimately somebody has to take the blame for getting it wrong. You can't get it wrong year in, year out.
But we are facing the very real possibility that Williams are not only going to be underachieving, not only going to be last, but actually they're going to be adrift, much like Manor, Caterham, Marussia. That's what we're realistically looking at now.
It's certainly heading that way, yeah.
Which is, as I said it, I felt terrible.
It brings me great pain, because I'm a huge Williams fan and always have been, and I don't like it. But at the end of the day, you have to be honest with it and say, well, okay, this is happening. Why is it happening? And the only answers you can come up with, it's not to do with money, because you look at Force India, what they do with the same kind of resources as Williams and the same kind of engine that Williams has, then it's down to something else. It's down to management, it's down to people. And that's when you have to start really getting tough. And that's when it gets nasty, admittedly.
So why don't we be a bit more positive? Because the three teams we covered there, I want to talk about what impact that might have on their racing performance. But before we do that, Joe, you are one of these fancy hoity-toity types that goes off, swans off around the EU, one of these elites in the French countryside sipping wine in luxury. But you are coming to London to grace us, to visit us on the 22nd of February. So that's this Friday.
It's this Friday, yes, I am. I'm coming to have one of my audiences where you can come and ask me any question you like and I'll try and answer it. And they're fun. They're fun events. And you can meet other race fans. You can ask questions. I'll answer every question I can. I'll feed you. So basically, it's not such a bad deal considering you get fed. You have to pay for your own booze, because we can't put up with all the dipsomaniacs in the world, myself included. But it'll be fun. It's happening in Chelsea. It's a nice area. You won't get mugged on the way home. Well, you might by rich people, but there you are. If you want to know more about it, check out the blog because it's all there. But I'm trying to give people insight. And one of the things you can do at a live event is say things which are not recorded, and nobody will ever be able to say that's what he said. So you get a little bit more insight than when things are recorded.
Well, I've been to a few of those now, and for me, it's the price of a show, and it's in central London, and you are surrounded by lots of other F1 fans, and you get to kind of chat about F1, even when you're not talking, Joe, during the dinner, during the breaks and everything. I've always found them very enjoyable. This time around, however, Mrs. Spanners is playing a live gig in London, and me and Trumpets are going down there. Unfortunately, Mrs. Spanners does trump my time over a live audience.
Listen, we all have, a lot of us have partners. In Formula One, sometimes we don't because you lose them along the way because you spend too much time doing things. But one has to balance all these things out. And we're very bad at balancing in Formula One terms because we tend to be very passionate about it. But I fully understand when people say, I can't do it. It's entirely understandable,
So if you want to go and have an audience with Joe, which I highly recommend, go to Joe at the internet and find details of that kind of thing. But let's get back to a bit of F1 racing because
JoeBlogsF1.com. It's on the blog there. You'll find it.
There's no other Joe Sawards. It's fine. Just type in Joe Saward and
but nobody ever spells my name right anyway. So.
Or says it right. Because I know people with your surname who pronounce it properly, but you insist on Saward, which I don't think is right. I think you might have got your own name wrong. But
perfectly understandable. Yes.
You should just make up a fake internet name. It's fine. Everyone's doing it. Joe, a bit more positivity though, because Alpha, with that big budget, people are talking about it as being a bigger budget. Force India having, Ottmeyer, Schaffnauer was talking about a change of philosophy, possibly.
Zafnauer.
Yeah, I got close enough. If you say it differently every time, you can never always be wrong. And then, of course, we've got Haas as well, who have managed to sort of steal rich energy away.
You have to be careful how you say Haas.
Haas. Out of those three teams, Joe, which one of those do you think can really be exciting with that change of financing? Because personally, I'm really excited about Racing Point. Sorry, I said Force India before, didn't I? I'm really excited about Racing Point. That is the team for me that's got the biggest range of what they could do. They could really disappoint with
but not in 1 year. See, the thing is in one. Well, there are two things.
But I want it now.
Well, you may want it now, but they need to build a new factory and a new wind tunnel and this and that. So there's a long way. There's a lot of investment necessary. The other thing is they don't have necessarily the best possible driver lineup, which I'll gloss over quite quickly. But the fact is that when you're dumping Esteban Ocon for somebody else, you're not necessarily doing it right.
Yeah, but that kind of came with the package, didn't it? So they wouldn't have that.
Be that as it may, you're asking me to give an opinion on whether they will perform well, and that I think will have an impact upon it.
Yeah, but Perez is blinking brilliant, though, isn't he?
Well, if he's awake, yeah.
Oh, Joe. Oh, don't break our hearts. Come on. I think Perez, given the right backing, could be great at carrying a team. However, there's that question mark over nepotism. Let's just say the dirty word. You know, is he going to be held back by being Lance Stroll's teammate?
Well, I hope not, because he's got a lot more chance of achieving things than Lance Stroll has.
Well, I agree. I agree with that, Joe.
Well, there you go. We agree on something finally. Anyway, of the others, I think that Alfa Romeo, we have to see how big a budget change it is. They have some very good people down there. But I think one of the most important factors of last year was Charles Leclerc. And I think that people need to be inspired. And if they're not inspired by Kimi Räikkönen and Antonio Giovinazzi, which, you know, they might be, but I don't see either one of them being, you know, the next big banana of Formula One. And, you know, we might see the workforce going back to 9 to 5 kind of approach, which is absolute death for a racing team. When you know, they get into not being inspired, what you want is the inspiration. Fernando Alonso might have been a pain in the neck, but he got people at McLaren working, you know. And that's what you have to have. You have to have people who go the extra mile for their drivers.
Would you say, though, that the midfield has definitely been shaken up this year? There's a lot we don't know. I don't think the top three are going to change, but that midfield is super exciting.
I don't know about the top three because I've got to be convinced about the Honda engines yet. So,
okay, I'll put my Spanners Bucks down here on the line. I think that the Honda will perform reasonably in the Red Bull. I think they'll have a great relationship, but I don't see Honda suddenly taking on the mantle of the top two engine suppliers. Not this year.
But having said that, at the end of last year, Red Bull was the team winning most things. They were the dominant force at the end of last year when you look at it. I mean, yes, Mercedes were finishing off the championship, but Max Verstappen should have won Brazil. He did win Mexico. What was the other one?
Singapore? Something?
No, Abu Dhabi.
Okay,
yeah. You know, the fact is that was a very, very successful team at the end of last year. Now, how far back is it going to drop? If it doesn't drop back, that's fine. It's great. We actually need Honda to be successful, I think, in Formula One terms. But will they be? I don't know. The other one I want to see is Renault, because I think that Renault has been putting the money in, has been developing the factory, has been doing all the things you need to do. So they should be moving closer to the top. McLaren, logically, should be moving closer to the top, but I think that's still a bit a team that's a little bit lost at the moment. I hope not, because I'm a big fan of McLaren as well. But you know, I just want to see things kind of making sense, and at the moment, it's all still sort of being glued together, if you know what I mean.
So then, Joe, why don't we finish off today? Because in line with your earlier comments about tech journalists, Summers has put some tech insight into what he thinks about the cars on first look, and he sent me some voice notes, and I'm just going to attach them to the end of the show. Of course, as we've established, he is just guessing. But we have some Q&A from Twitter, if you don't mind, Joe. DB, Double Bargeboard, says, Silverstone, is this the last year? Because I need to know whether I'm going to buy a ticket or not. But it's always last year at Silverstone, isn't it?
No, this one is probably, the way things are going at the moment, it could be the last year, but I'm not sure that anyone's really willing to let that happen. But how they find a solution is another matter. There needs to be a solution found. I'm told that the gap between what is being asked and what is required is not as big as people think. But, there has to be a solution that suits everybody. Will that be... I can see a deal happening, maybe, whereby it's a short-term 3-year deal, maybe keeping the same price and maybe knocking down the escalator, increasing. There may be a way around it, but at the same time, if Liberty Media finds other races willing to pay more money, it might take the risk and sort of say, well, is the British Grand Prix really essential, particularly in this age of Brexit, where Britain is doing weird things. So I don't know.
We'll see. No strong opinion on that one way or the other. But as a punter, looking at Silverstone, I've not been to Silverstone since 2013. And
ancient history.
Well, I know every year, though, I look at it and I go, I've got to get down there with Treeface. To show him some racing again. The only time we've been to Silverstone actually has been for the 6 Hours World Endurance Championship, which sitting in the stands is very good. I don't think it comes across fantastically on telly all the time. But I've not gone to a Grand Prix because every year I look at the prices and I go, as just a working Joe, I look at those prices and even just for yourself, it's terrible. And then you add the kid and you think, well, maybe on the outside of it, I could take him out of school on a Friday. But the prices for Silverstone are just insane from our point of view. Is that to do with these escalating payments?
No, it's to do with the fact that Silverstone is incapable of getting government money. Every other race in the calendar has government money from some level or other. Silverstone hasn't got it. They say they can't get it. They should be able to get it. The trouble is, to use that word we're not allowed to mention, there's no politician in this country who's thought about anything other than this stupid word for the last 12 months. And it's not going to get any better. They should save the British Grand Prix, put some money into it and stop messing about. But they're too busy worrying about whether bananas are going to get delivered or not. So whatever the thing is, it is only natural that when every other race on the Formula One calendar has government money, how can you assume that Britain will survive without it? I think what may happen is they'll have to drop it from the calendar to wake up these idiots in Parliament to realise that there is a very important industry behind this business. And we've seen that happen in other countries. We saw Canada drop out one year when the politicians were being idiots. And boy, did they run back in a hurry when they realized what they'd given away. So we'll see. But fundamentally, I think Britain has to have some kind of government money behind it because everyone else does.
That was a PSA from Inside F1 with Joe Saward on Missed Apex podcast. Remember, kids, stockpile on booze and remain indoors. Above all else, remain indoors. I have one more question for you from Darren.
Very droll.
From Darren Vincent. Has he watched, I think you're the he, Joe, has he watched Formula E yet? 4 great races so far. Now,
in the new Formula E or the old one?
Season 5 Formula E. Since I've known you, you have softened a little bit from unless it's exploding dead dinosaur, I don't care, to, oh, well, maybe there's some merit to a bit of esports and stuff. So I want to grill you a little bit. Have you softened on Formula E?
Formula E and esports are not the same thing.
No, they're two different things, Joe. So I'm going to ask you about 2 different things.
Okay, but esports I'm big on now.
Big on? Whoa, not just accepting of, big on.
No, having looked at it closely, I think it's terrific. And I think what's going on is really worth following. Formula E, I'm not convinced about because I still don't believe that electric cars are necessarily the future. And until they solve the problem of battery development, I don't see why it's going to change.
I agree with you.
I think hydrogen will come along before electric cars really make it.
Okay, so. I agreed with some of that. So the first bit about the battery development, I absolutely agree with you on that term from an engineering point of view. However, from a racing point of view, Formula E's done all right.
What's exciting about Formula E? Look, it's not exciting that the bloke winning the race runs out of fuel at the last corner. I mean, that's exciting, yes, because you get a scrabbling across the line, but it's like NASCAR, you know. Was the Daytona 500 last night exciting because they kept crashing into each other, or was it just rather silly? I mean, it was beautiful to watch all the sparks as these 21 cars collided with each other. It was beautiful, but it was totally stupid in terms of wasting money. And you know, and it took, the last 10 laps took 45 minutes. Because they kept red flagging it because they just all collided with each other. They don't race for the first 450 kilometers. They only race in the last 10 minutes. So is that great racing? Is it a terrific result? You know, racing is not about necessarily what happens in the last 20 meters of a race. You know, it's about, Formula One is a subtle kind of excitement. And if you understand what's going on, people say, you know, Mercedes have won 75% of the races. That's true, but they haven't. It hasn't been dominant. They've been very, very close. Lots of the races. If you don't understand that they're close, then you're not being told the story correctly, and that's where I think Formula One has failed, is that we don't tell the story of just how close they are.
So, does that mean, now that you're a lover of esports, that you're going to be tuned into the Missed Apex iRacing League, which is going to be taking place very soon, Joe?
I have no idea. The iRacing, well, because I invented that, didn't I? So.
You invented it. Go on then, Joe. Why don't you tell us your Brian Blessed style story of how you invented esports? Honestly, before the live stream started, Joe was there going, I invented esports. Go on. Tell us.
No, I didn't. I didn't invent esports. What I did was, by accident, without knowing I'd done it, is that, and I only discovered this because the guy put out a video, or somebody put out a video. Man who invented Grand Prix Legends and iSports did so because he was inspired by a book in 1980, whenever, 6, 7, something like that. And it just happened to be a book that I wrote. So it's kind of funny in a kind of roundabout way. And if you want to see, there is a video on flatoutpublishing.com which explains it all, in his words, not mine, about how he was inspired by reading this book. And I just thought it's really funny how the world is, how the world turns, and you can inspire a lot of people by writing a book without realizing the impact of it.
Wait a minute. I'm no detective, Joe. But did your sudden U-turn on deciding esports were brilliant coincide with you also deciding that you invented esports?
No, completely not. I didn't invent esports.
That's your claim.
No, it's not quite what I said. But no, it didn't. What happened was that I thought at the end of last year, before actually I sort of thought through the whole iSport thing, iRacing thing rather, I thought there's a whole bunch of people getting excited about this eSport. And there are sponsors going into it. And there's a young generation here, maybe because the young generation are things that everybody in Formula One, particularly the media, is lacking. Maybe I should look at this and see if there's a way that I can relate to younger generations now. As I'm obviously a crusty old fellow.
It's too late, Joe. I'm just marking this explicit.
Very good. Well, fart's not a bad word anyway. That it was probably worth having a look at. And when I looked at it, the more I looked at it, I thought, actually, these guys are quite impressive, some of them. Not all of them, but some of them are very impressive. And the technology is very impressive. And I think the potential for doing things is very impressive. And for driving new business into Formula One, that's where I think its value lies. And it's just a matter of handling it properly. Now, the ultimate way of doing that would be to pick up the guy who wins the championship and turn him into a Formula One racer. But that's a really seriously difficult thing to do.
Baby steps.
The nearest we've got to that would be Jan Mardenborough, who's racing in Japan, who was one of the original Nissan Academy winners.
Yeah, very early esports representative though. So you know things are only going to evolve from that. Lando Norris is probably
but the talent, you know, the fact. But Lando's done it in real cars, and you've got to have that racecraft you don't have in a virtual game. So you've got to start in probably Formula 4. You can't go in anywhere higher than that, I don't think. But I don't know. I mean, there's only one way to find out, and that's to see if they can do it. But you know, the people who do this stuff have got the same motor skills and high hand-to-eye coordination that racing drivers have. They've got all the same skills. What we don't know is, do they have the courage, and do they have the fitness?
That's a big factor, yeah.
These are elements that are very key. And there's also the question of determination as well. You know, sitting in a fake cockpit, driving a fake car around a fake circuit, doesn't necessarily mean you can do it for the real thing.
Joe, I am heartened hearing you say this. I really am. Especially someone from your generation can reach all the way back here into the future where we are and acknowledge the level of competition and the skill it takes to do gaming. Because I am a huge gamer and I've always had to deal with parents and now Mrs. Spanners talking about it as if it's just playing, you know, Qbert on your phone or something like that. But it's not. I honestly, genuinely see computer games at their very top as up there with sports in terms of competition, not in terms of physicality and bravery. So I'm very heartened to hear you say that. The Missed Apex iRacing event will now, I believe, be on Sunday, the 24th of February. So I think that's next Sunday, isn't it? Yeah, so next Sunday, yeah. Probably. I think I've still got to ask some permission. But if you want to get on the iRacing list, make sure you email me, spannersready@gmail.com, and let me know if you want to be in on this Sunday, because we now have too many people registered to all fit on one grid, which is a fantastic problem to have. But you should be fine for the moment. Joe, people can, of course, follow you by searching Joe Saward Blogs F1.
They can, absolutely. And, you know, I'm glad that we're making some progress in that direction of being understood. But, you know, I think that we have to. Formula One is all about the future. So we have to be smart enough to accept that there is a future. Where the future is, we don't necessarily know where it's going. But, you know, for me, I fully understand the idea behind the whole esport concept. I just want to see, in fact, I'm fascinated to see, there is talk at the moment of the Formula One motor racing in general has one absolutely unique advantage over every other kind of esport there is. Do you know what that is?
Tell me.
It's the only sport where you do the same thing. If you're playing e-football, you're not kicking anything.
No, you're hammering buttons.
If you're doing e-horse riding, you're not sitting there bucking around on something. The only sport where you do exactly the same thing is motor racing. And there's talk of motor racing getting to the Olympic Games as an e-sport.
Ooh. Well, there you go. You really have done a 360 here, Joe.
No, I haven't. I'm just recognizing that there are things that perhaps I wasn't thinking about before. That's all.
Make sure
that doesn't make it a 360. It just means that I'm wiser as I get older or something, you know.
A wise man changes his mind when the evidence changes. And Joe, I think you've proved yourself in F1 to be a wise man. Make sure you
I've remained in Formula One for a long time.
Exactly. Yes. Make sure you go and see Joe and find those stories of many, 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 many decades of Formula One journalism experience. It is worth the price of entry. I can personally vouch for that. You can follow the show at Missed Apex F1, and you can follow me by searching Spanners Ready on all the social media stuff. For the audio listeners, you will, after the credits, hear Summers F1 giving us a little tech roundup of what he thought of the car launches, and he'll be joining us for a full podcast very, very soon between the two testing sessions. Until we see you again, remember that wounds heal, chicks dig scars, and glory lasts forever. This was Inside F1 with Joe. no. If you look at all the aero, yeah. So basically, this isn't going out on the show, Joe, but you've just alienated like Summers, Scarbs, all those tech guys. You've just said they're all guessing. It's terrible.
Well, tell me they're not.
I don't know. It all sounds like wizardry to me. They're very convincing. I know,
but that's the whole point. The point is they sound good, but do they actually know what they're talking about?
I don't know, but it's interesting content. I enjoy the content.
No, I listen.
The thing is, engineering is such a huge part of the sport.
I just know how complex it is, and it was never that complex. You know, when I was growing up, Formula One was complicated, but it wasn't that complicated. Nowadays, vortices interacting with vortices, and all kinds of stuff like that. You know, they can't possibly understand what it is that's going on.
See, so the engineering though of the car is such a big part of the sport that it should be covered in some way. Is it the team's fault?
I don't disagree with that. But having said that, I've also noted over 100 years of being a Formula One person that the readership interested in technical stuff is 10%.
No, that's true.
10%.
Our audience
only 10%.
Our audience dips drastically when we do the tech stuff. However, we do get a lot of positive feedback from the niche, but the overall figures plummet.
It is 10%. That's exactly the right number. I've watched it for 30 years.
I have often wondered if we did a separate feed for Missed Apex tech shows, how many downloads would we get? I think you might be right. I think it might be in that 10%. But it's a very passionate 10%.
They're very passionate 10%. But, you know, most of it's way too complicated and always has been. So, anyway, it's not going to stop people bullshitting away merrily, so whatever.
Joe, that was a fantastic first chat back. Thank you for indulging me in the first 20 minutes just talking about all the journalism stuff. I am genuinely just fascinated about just how you cut about, you know, and like what I meant to ask, which I never got round to, which maybe I will next time, is like how, like I know so many like people trying to break into F1 journalism, and you know what's the right way to go about it, what's the wrong way to go about it. I'd love to do just a little bit on that next time. I think
it's very simple. If you want to break into it, you just do it and make it happen. That's it. Yeah. Everyone can sit at home and whinge about it, but everybody I know who's made it has just gone out and done it. Yeah, and that's it. You've got to do the stuff, and not only that, you've got to do 10 things that don't work as well. You know, you've got to keep pushing down a million different paths to make stuff work. But trouble is that the paths are becoming fewer. So what you really need is somebody paying your bills to travel, and so that's why the autosport jobs, God knows how long they're going to last for. The ESPN jobs, these kind of jobs, racer who pay the expenses, and there are very few of them left now. Without them, or rich daddies, because that's the other way things are paid for. And of course, you can't mention that, but there's a lot of rich daddies out there. Yeah, no. Oh my God, this career thing. I mean, you think, anyone's got an equal chance of being a journalist. That's not true. But in a career like music or journalism, where you have to take a lot of risks and you have to go out on the road, if you know there's a trust fund behind you when you come back, or if you know your parents are going to go, right, well, you go off and do your thing, we will fund your travel, and when you come back, here's your university fund as well. That makes an absolutely huge difference too. What you really need is an extremely rich dad who needs a tax write-off, and that pays your travel bills in a year. Well, I'm firmly at the point of my career where I know that I didn't have those step-ups. But maybe I can just claw myself up enough in the next 10 years that when Treeface and Little V are looking for work experience and they're looking for their little thing, then maybe go, I know, look, here, Joe, here's catch Treeface, just take him away for a week, you know, that kind of thing. But there's 10 years to go and you'll be retired by then. So that's I'm the grandfather and I've got my own little Treefaces, I suppose. So. Good. Anyway, there we go. Onward and upward. Enjoy Barcelona. Send us some selfies from Barca, will you? When's this going to go out? Any ideas? In about 40 minutes. Oh, really? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I do the turnaround pretty quickly, and normally it takes about 4 hours to get rid of all the, all that. But you've been good this week, so it's been fine. I'm trying to behave myself. Yeah, because I got told off last time. No, we had an audio management meeting. That's all. That's all, kids. This will go out certainly by the morning, and the video will be out by the morning as well. And I will send you a webcam, Joe.
if you'll receive one.
Will it make any difference on this computer?
Don't know. It's relatively cheap to find out. So if not, just send it back and I'll sell it.
Okay. I mean, because I'm thinking of actually getting a proper screen and having a webcam on the top of it, because that would also solve the angle problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, not having a Mac as well. That would be brilliant. That'd be great.
No, that's never going to happen. I'm telling you now.
What is wrong with you people? You're like, oh my god.
It's just Macs are just. It's a bit like.
It's like a cult, Joe. It's a cult.
It is. It's like beautiful women. You know,
it's not like beautiful women. It's not. No, that's.
No, I mean there are some people who like Japanese women and some people who don't. You know.
No, that's kid. That is. I'm so glad we're not recording. Steve, we're not recording this, right? Don't. Not even for the outtakes. Not even for the. Not even for the map Christmas party. Joe, I will let you go. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy Barcelona.
Very good. Well, I shall be there for at least 6 hours, so I'll speak to you soon.
Tell them about podcasting and the shed and stuff. Tell everyone.
Ciao, ciao.
Tell everyone. Bye. There we go, kids. Thank you very much, live stream. You were fantastic company today. Today, you were fantastic company. It's been lovely hanging out. I do enjoy Joe's time. And I know a lot of you thought that maybe he wasn't coming back. We only took a 2-month break. So we only essentially missed one show. Joe likes to come on here generally monthly. I think that's quite a good space. So yeah. Thank you very much, and I will see you. Good evening. Also, people complain that I press stop at the wrong time, so I'm just going to stand here silently for a bit and then press stop, and then surely no one can complain. I'm even going to mute.